Welcome back to Face the Nation. I'm Margaret Brennan. We are just over 5 months away from the midterm elections, and today we are kicking off our Battleground Tracker poll with the CBS News Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto. Anthony, good to have you here. Typically, the party in control of the White House often loses some seats with these congressional races. The Democrats seem to be banking on a blue wave to retake control. Is it that clear cut?
It is not that clear cut. We think today, if the election were held, House control would be a toss-up. The Democrats are poised to gain seats. You're right about that. They're the out party. Typically, the out party does get some seats. We think they would get enough to just barely take the majority. We estimate they'd get 219 seats. It takes 218 to control the House. So it's that close. What we do think is that as we go along, we're going to see this go back and forth. We think that the House could come down to just a handful of districts, and that's going to be really exciting to watch.
And as you say, those districts in particular are going to make it even more exciting because they're not clear Trump supporters, they're not clear Democrats. They're suburban and they tend to be fairly well off.
Right. See, here's how we know this. The House, of course, is a race for 435 districts. They're all up. But the bulk of them never change parties. Incumbents get reelected, partisans stay with their preferred party. So all of this really comes down to a relatively smaller number of districts that are competitive, where both parties have good candidates, where the voters are more evenly divided. And that's how we know this. What we've done here is we've taken a sample in our surveys, heavily concentrated in these districts. We think there are about 50 to 60 of them that are going to determine control. These are the swing districts. So as we look really hard at those places and we start to follow them, they're coast to coast. They're in Republican pockets of blue states like New Jersey or California, even Texas, some. They are heavily suburban, as you mentioned, and they're the places where there's not necessarily a concentration of Trump voters and there's not necessarily a part of the Democratic base, and that's a big part of what puts them in play.
Now, establishment Republicans in particular want to run on the economy, and certainly the president gave them what he's crediting as a very strong jobs number, and you do see unemployment rates for Hispanics and African Americans at multi-decade lows. How does that change the race?
Well, the good economy is clearly part of the wind at the backs of Republicans. It's one of the things we think in the survey could help them hang on to their majority, even if narrowly, because voters across these districts say that the economy is good. And that is true of both Republicans and Democrats and independents. Clearly a plus for the Republicans. But there's a bit of what you might call a payoff problem for this Republican Congress in that when we ask about some of the things that the Congress has done, including economic things like the tax cut, like changes to health care, most voters say that they haven't yet felt the effects of those things, not the positive effects, not even negatively, they just aren't there. So, you start to see the Republicans probably needing to make an argument going forward that these things have helped people, because that, at least in the surveys, doesn't seem to be resonating just yet.
So when the White House talks about making more tweaks to tax policy, that might be something to help out some of those Republicans. The Democrats, though, by all accounts, are energized. Does that make a difference?
Yeah, coming off a year in which they did well in a lot of these special elections, a lot of Democrats have been hopeful that they can kind of scale up that enthusiasm, let it carry over those 435 districts. Even in this survey, we see the Democrats heavily dependent on turning out voters who don't typically vote in midterms. I really can't stress that enough. Even as we watch the polling going forward, you're going to see a lot of folks who tell us that they're going to vote in the midterms, but they don't profile as though they normally do. Often midterm turnout is lower than it is in the presidential. Democrats have to change that equation. Right now, Democrats say that they are doing it. They say they're enthusiastic. They say that this midterm vote is as important as their presidential vote. That's an important part to watch going forward. We'll see if they can sustain it, though, over 6 months.
Because that's always the question, right? The president himself is not on the ballot. Is this actually sort of a referendum on him and what he's delivered?
Yeah, in congressional elections, we usually see a majority of people saying that they feel their vote is either to support or oppose the president. It's no different here. Half of the folks voting for Democrats say that they're doing it to oppose the administration. But is that enough? Is that going to be enough? Because we also see that people say they're not quite clear on what the Democrats would do if they got elected, if they got the House majority. So that's part of the argument that it looks like the Democrats still need to make if they're going to get even more seats and sort of go even more comfortably into a position where they could take control.
And of course, Steve Bannon, who was very successful in advising the president back in 2016, is urging Republicans to run on immigration, not necessarily the economy.
Yeah.
Is that a good strategy?
Well, look, when we talk to Republicans in these districts, they want to hear about immigration. They say that they feel like immigration has changed their local area and not for the better. It's one of their top issues, if not the top issue, and it's something that sort of unites the base.
As a security issue or as an employment issue?
It's actually both. It's very much both. They are concerned about security, but they've also been, in recent polling, also concerned about immigrants taking low-wage jobs. Now, the difference, though, is that in a lot of these districts, folks say that jobs are still at least a minor problem. And, if you look back to the idea that the economy is still good, the larger question to watch is, do the Republicans run on this sort of larger, hey, everything's good, the economy's good message? Or if you're talking about immigration, you're kind of saying, well, there's still problems that need to be fixed because the problem really hasn't been solved. Well, which is it, right? Which, in the larger sense, is it everything's good or there's still problems? That's one of the key things to watch as they go forward.
You heard former House Speaker John Boehner say earlier that there's no Republican Party anymore. It's Trump's party. Republicans are taking a nap somewhere. How on the money is he with that?
Well, in terms of candidates for Congress, 3/4 of Republicans say that they want their House candidates to be somebody in line with Donald Trump. And that's as opposed to when we ask them if they'd want a candidate who's more independent from Donald Trump. So to that extent, it does appear to be the president's party.
Well, obviously, Republican leaders in the House and Senate can't like hearing the criticism, but for Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, how concerned does he need to be on his side of the Capitol about losing some seats?
Only somewhat, but not very, because the map really favors the Republicans going in. Here's what I mean. When we look at the third of the Senate that's up for election this cycle, most of them are Democrats, and there's a lot of Democratic senators who are trying to hang on in states that are traditionally Republican, that are red states, right? And that's particularly true across the Midwest, from Missouri to Indiana to North Dakota. When you look at that and you think in this hyper-partisan environment where Republicans vote for Republicans and Democrats for Democrats, these senators have to worry that that's what's going to happen to them, that because there's more Republicans in these states, that they'll get swept out. The difference, and what we'll watch through the year, is whether or not these red state Democrats can make it about local issues, can make it about them and their candidacy, as opposed to that national partisanship. But overall, on balance, the map favors the Republicans.
We'll be hearing from you, Anthony, quite a lot as we head towards the fall. Thank you very much.
Should be fun.
We'll be right back. We'll talk about a lot of